Hi, I'm Gatekeeping, and you are watching 36 Years, where we talk about Philippine news, politics, and democracy. On May 9, the Philippines elected Ferdinand Marcos Jr. as president. He is the second Marcos to hold the post, the first being his father, the late dictator, and his namesake, Ferdinand Marcos Sr., who was ousted during what is now called the People Power Revolution of 1986. That was 36 years ago. Here on this show, we try to make sense of where Philippine democracy is heading 36 years after the revolution. Welcome to 36 Years, available on Rappler's social media pages and on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Now, in this episode, we talk again about the media. Again, because 2 episodes ago, I did talk to Inday Espina Verona of Rappler to talk about the regions, how our colleagues outside Metro Manila, how they are and how they will be under the new administration. But this time, we're talking to someone closer to literal home, literal and figurative home. It's a conversation that's partly philosophical and admittedly sometimes intelligible, because this guest is a riot to talk to. Jonathan De Santos is a PhilStar editor and the chairman of the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines. More importantly, kasi we declare our biases in this show, he's a very dear friend and a colleague who constantly ruminates on the state of journalism in the Philippines and how we as an industry and as a people can better improve it. But before that, it's been a while since I did this, and I'm so glad it's back kasi life and work got in the way in previous episodes. So before we head into that interview with Jonathan, here are the headlines. Country's 12th president, Fidel Valdez Ramos, died on July 31, 2022. He was 94. Ramos was a soldier. He was a chief of the Philippine Constabulary under the first President Marcos and later the chief of staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines under the late Cory Aquino. The former president is remembered as a hero of the 1986 People Power Revolution. Then Constabulary Chief Ramos withdrew support for President Ferdinand Marcos, who happened to be his cousin. Ramos and the Constabulary's withdrawal of support is seen as the tipping point that fortified the anti-Marcos base within the armed forces, so writes journalist Manny Mogato in his profile and obituary for Rappler. As president and successor to Cory Aquino, he is remembered for, among many things, quote, Philippines 2000. Yung mga mas bata na viewers siguro won't remember this. Honestly, I don't even really remember this because I was too young to appreciate those policies at that time. But I'm sure our older, our more mature, and news dork or economy dork viewers will be familiar with this. Patricio Abinales and Donna Amoroso in the book State and Society in the Philippines summarize his economic strategy into 2 points: trade liberalization and privatization. Depending on where you stand in the social and economic spectrum, those 2 major legacies may mean very different things to you. The former military general is also remembered for his impact on peace efforts in the Philippines. He reached a peace agreement with the Moro National Liberation Front and conducted peace talks with the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, and the National Democratic Front. But it was also during his time when the country's intelligence community wiped out the top leadership of the communist underground. Read more about Ramos's legacy on Rappler. We'll be including the links to the stories about the former president in the story page for this episode. In news that's frankly no surprise to anyone at all, the Philippines is staying out of the International Criminal Court. President Marcos made the announcement in a chance interview with media on August 1. The Philippines withdrew as a member state in 2019 under former President Rodrigo Duterte after the ICC prosecutor then initiated a preliminary examination into incidents linked to Duterte's bloody war on drugs. More than 6,000 people have been killed in the drug war. Those are official government statistics, but human rights groups have a higher tally, much higher compared to government tallies. Over 30,000 killed, including victims of vigilante-style killings. It is no surprise the sitting president, after all, is allies with the sitting vice president, Sara Duterte, who is the daughter of the former president. And she was also a key ally, a key member of the Uniteam Alliance, on top of being a candidate, of course. Marcos has also apparently gotten losing senatorial candidate, former presidential spokesperson, and one-time human rights defender Harry Roque as private counsel. He joined them in a meeting in Malacanang to discuss the ICC. The decision to not rejoin the ICC will not affect the ongoing investigation into the bloody war on drugs. And those are the headlines. Now on to the interview with Jonathan De Santos. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Bea.
What an introduction.
Oh,
No. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
of course, Andy. Thanks for having us now.
And today.
Well,
and
evening.
forever. Hindi. Yung siguro yung unang tanong ko, kasi we're gonna talk about media under the new president who just delivered his SONA. By the time this airs, it had been 1 week na, mag-1 week na when this airs, no? Let's start from what the previous president leaves behind. So, marami na akong narinig kasi na parang people, like, we breathed out a sigh of relief that Duterte is no longer the president. And if we're gonna ride on the cliches, diba, parang what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But how do you think the media has survived those 6 years under President Duterte?
Yun, by sheer, siguro, willpower, no? By sheer gumption, no? Kasi siya parang, it's easy to say, parang nung past administration, they like to say na free pa naman yung press, nakakapag-report pa naman kayo, no? Pero we know naman na a lot of the time, iniisip din natin syempre, no, yung mga reports natin, what will this mean, no? What will this lead to, no? Parang anong possible hassle, anong possible na, let's say, implications na madadala ng mga certain stories, no? So we have learned to work within those lines siguro, or work within those parang restrictions, pero hindi siya matter of dahil pinayagan tayo, hindi siya matter of parang yung magnanimity of the government, no? We did it despite all those restrictions, we did it despite all those threats, I think. So yun, we have survived precisely kasi yung Philippine press has been, well, for lack of a better word, very resilient tayo. Hindi lang naman in the past administration nagkaroon ng pangikipit sa media, no? And we have, I think, drawn on the experiences of yung mga veterans, no, from previous administrations and how they dealt with the government then.
But at the same time, I think even our elders, yung sakto talaga yung mga boss natin, and who happen to be the journalists who grew up towards the tail end of martial law, of the first Marcos president. Sila yung baby journalists when democracy was restored. But I think for a lot of them, parang if totally different animal din yung Duterte administration, the experience of going through Duterte as well.
Yeah, siguro partly dahil napaka-brazen nung pagkikipit sa media nung huling administration. Ano? I mean, in previous administrations, medyo may soft touch pang konti. May parang, kahit pa paano, may... Although sa Duterte administration din, meron din naman parang cloak of legality sa mga nangyayari. No?
Yeah.
Pero very openly hostile yung past administration, I think, compared to previous ones.
Yeah. Okay. This show deals with understanding where we are based on where we come from. And as much as I don't want to dwell on the past administration, kasi ideally we focus on the topic today is about media under the second Marcos administration. But
Siguro nga, hindi ko nga alam, is it too early para sabihin na meron na tayong benefit of hindsight? Um, kasi ilang buwan lang naman yung lumipas, Duterte pa yung president natin. No? Pero, what are the things you think that, I mean, we've survived, obviously, Rappler's still here, ABS-CBN has found ways to remain ABS-CBN despite not having a franchise. But what are the things that we collectively I don't wanna say we did wrong eh, kasi parang ano na yun eh, parang high and mighty tayo na, alam mo yun, parang ay, nako, dapat ito yung ginawa niyo, whatever. Pero, what were the things that we let slip siguro? We didn't realize na, oh, you know, that was a turning point or something.
Ayun, precisely, itong mga nangyaring ang attacks sa Rappler and ABS-CBN and when other newsrooms naman, the idea, I think, for a lot of newsrooms was to sort of toe the line a little bit, be more, ayaw sabihin friendly, but a bit more, parang magbigay ng konting space to be more, yun nga, fair, no? Precisely to avoid the same fate, no? Syempre, people will say, of course, kailangan natin mabuhay, no? Kailangan natin mag-survive and we have to make some adjustments, no? Pero I think yun kasi, yung adjustments na yan, medyo maliliit yan, parang inch by inch yan. And then you look back and see na parang, ay, ang dami pala natin binigay na parang free space, ang dami natin binigay na, yun, ang dami na hinayaan.
Benefit of the doubt.
Oh, I mean, syempre, di ba? It's easy to say now or it's easy to say from where we are, no? Kasi syempre, hindi naman tayo yung decision makers on a corporate level, for example. Parang hindi natin siya problema masyado.
Yeah.
Well, kayo a little bit.
Yeah, but like, even ako, like on a personal level, there are stories I wrote probably in the 2016 campaign and even in the early months of the Duterte administration na when I was writing them, parang I was absolutely sure na ito yung tamang phrasing, ito yung tamang premise, ito yung tamang wording, ito yung tamang angulo. Pero parang with the 2020 lens, I cringe a little at 26-year-old Bea, 25 pala ako nun, pero parang, oh my gosh. That could have been written better? Parang ganun.
Siguro, well nga, yun nga, hindsight naman na talaga, no? But I think yung parang our hearts were in the right place. Yung principles that we were writing from were correct naman. Pwedeng sa phrasing, pwedeng in a way, yun nga, baka we were a bit too snarky, ganyan, and it cost us siguro then some trust from the public. Pero that was, parang I feel that was the mood of the time. And ewan ko kung babalikan natin, would we do it any differently? Who knows? Kasi yun yung medyo millennial-ish to, pero yun yung vibe at the time eh. Parang yun nga, it came from a good place naman. It might not have worked. Medyo if you look at social media now, no, parang medyo maraming galit sa atin and that's one problem that we have to deal with now.
Yeah. I mean, these are things that I don't know if the general public understands this or assumes this of us, but this is actually something that I don't know, baka yung bubble lang natin, Jonathan, no, na this is something that consumes a lot of our thoughts na where are we now? What is going on with our industry? And where are we heading?
Ay, totoo, no? Parang very constant nga, I mean, we don't really see each other as often, pero yung when we do, kunyari sa mga parang off time or whatever, kunyari umiinom or
sabihin
whatever.
Sabihin mo inuman, off time.
Inuman, yun nga, or some other wholesome activity. Lagi naman ganon, we do a lot of soul searching. Minsan self-flagellation pa, no, na what could we have done, And I think medyo trap din yun for us to parang may tendency to navel gaze and not look at what we could do now or what we could build on now from kung ano yung meron from before.
Yeah. I totally get that na parang in being so obsessed with correcting the mistakes of the past, parang ang corny na sabihin ko dapat, we forget to look at the future na parang next steps na dapat yung iniisip natin right away.
Pero totoo yan, no? Ayun nga kasi nga, and yun nga, we tend to say na parang, hanggang we're working in such restrictive environments. What more can we do, no? Pero ayun nga, I hope yung ganong mga conversations actually lead to decisions, no, or agreements on what we could actually do moving forward, no.
Yeah. Siguro kung what do you call it? If I lay down the premise of this conversation, we have a second Marcos as president. Um, Beyond that, meron din tayo, di ba, the attacks, the lingering effects of Rodrigo Duterte, not just towards media, but human rights defenders, the idea of human rights in general, and then disinformation. Actually, ang dami niyang layer, pero siguro, isa-isahin muna natin. Let's talk about social media muna. I'm pretty sure we've spoken about this, obviously not on air and not on record, and not for other people to see, but I think our generation of journalists, so yung older millennials, in the journalism
na napasama
industry.
ako doon.
Oo naman, ano ka ba? Hindi, pero tayo mga parang yung older millennials, we're talking about the 30s forward, gano'n.
Right.
Tayo yung, Twitter was a novelty when we came in, right? Like, minsan ano pa siya, as in literal novelty siya, at one point I was known as the Twitter girl in one of my beats, right? Like, but now it's silly to even label someone as a Twitter person, because every journalist is on Twitter. But I bring that up because obviously the world has changed so much from 2012, 2013 na parang novelty.
Bago pa yung live tweeting. Like, we are live
diba?
tweeting from this place.
Oo, tuwang-tuwa yung mga tao nakakita when they see me like tweeting fast. Parang novelty pa siya noon. Ngayon, napag-iiwanan ako ng mga younger reporters. But anyway, no. I was just asking that because of there is this debate on social media or in journalism beyond the Philippines, like in the US especially, no, about journalists becoming influencers in a way, not consciously, but by virtue of being social media personalities. How do you make sense of that? Parang, whether we like it or not, may brand na tayo on social media.
Yeah, I would like to think, no, yung, kunyari, our spewing our, I mean, hindi lang naman to news updates, parang, di ba, parang sharing our thoughts with the world, or parang, kahit nga jokes, gano'n. I feel that it makes us parang, hindi naman relatable, but more human, na parang, we are actually, as they say, no, we live in a society, and affected din naman tayo by things, no, by the things we report on. Saka, I think it's also a little better na alam ng mga tao, like, alam ng mga viewers or ng audience, yung quote-unquote biases natin, or where we are reporting from. For example, kung ang bias mo ay due process, no, and you stress that kunyari in your social media posts, then at least alam nila, no, siguro that's why this report is written this way, or maybe that's why itong source na to was given primacy in your story, kasi for the writer, importante yung due process, or importante yung human rights, and that's not wrong. I think may narrative kasi na parang things like human rights, democracy, parang ano yan some sort of part of some propaganda by the West or whatever, no? Pero actually, kung titingnan mo, no, yung putting weight on things like human rights, obligation yan ng Pilipinas, no, that we entered into in 1946. So parang very Filipino values to actually.
I like that idea though of social media in a way as a means of transparency and accountability in a way as a journalist. Are you personally comfortable though with the idea na Jonathan as a brand on social media, whether you like it or not?
Kasi nga, no, as you said, no, in mga 20... in 2012 kasi, parang ano lang to, we were just like kids, parang
having fun.
Having fun, screaming into the void, ganyan, parang ito yung kinain ko, ganyan. And then suddenly, it's part of the job. Suddenly part na siya ng like KPI siya to maintain a social media something. I don't know. Parang ganon, di ba? It's part of, whether we like it or not nga, brand na tayo. And I'm not super comfortable in the sense na parang hindi naman dapat tayo bumibida, no? Pero we shouldn't pretend na ano tayo, parang like transcriptionists or robots na walang nararamdaman sa buhay, ganyan, no?
Yeah. But I think in fairness naman, I think there is a way. I do not have the formula for that way. But there's a way to for your name to be there because you have no choice because that's how Twitter works. It's literally andun yung username, andun yung pangalan mo. Pero hindi ikaw yung bida. I mean, we've been doing that naman, especially kung TV reporter ka, di ba? Siyempre, mukha mo yung andun, mukha mo yung nakikita.
Right. Oh.
Radio reporter ka, boses mo yung narinig. Print reporter ka, byline mo yung nakikita. There's a way to be present but to not be the star of the story.
Right.
Siguro yun yung...
and further, siguro, kunyari, magkukukuda tayo on social media, kailangan yung principles pa rin will be the same. Like, you can't make stuff up. Unless, obviously, clearly, I joke siya, no? Pero if you're reporting something or if you're sharing your opinion on like an issue, kailangan may grounding siya on facts, may grounding siya on some sort of principle, no? Hindi naman yung dahil lang clouty siya or whatever.
Yeah. Although I will have to say that, I'm very ambivalent towards the idea of cloud chasing, not cloud chasers, but cloud chasing, only because social media is designed for everyone to be a cloud chaser. Kasi, ayan pala pag-usapan yung dopamine. Basta parang, saan tutuwa ka kung napapansin ka on social media? So, it's very human nature. So, parang I'm not comfortable also with automatically demonizing people who get happy.
No. I agree. I mean, pero siguro we have to look at congruence then na parang, if you're saying a certain thing, sana naman that's really what you feel or at least may gano'n kang grounding na parang ito yung napaniwala ko, hindi yung parang magko-comment ako on Philippine X again. Parang gano'n, di ba? Parang...
May earnestness siguro and ambag lang sa lipunan sana.
Yes. Kasi di ba, kasi hindi naman recycled bar the lines again. Parang gano'n.
Yeah. I mean,
value add pa rin.
No, kasi it's so noisy, right? Like, I honestly, even in 2012, I already realized the social media is very noisy, but the noise now is intense. Like, every time I open Twitter.com, parang, ano namang away nangyayari dito?
And hindi pa kasama dito yung mga discourse and narratives na, to be honest, bordering on disturbing, no? Kunyari, yung doon sa Ateneo shooting, suddenly the narrative is, yung shooter was like forced into it by circumstance or parang victims of injustice. Like, what the
Ginawa
heck?
siyang some Robin Hood or something like that.
Yeah. For basically killing someone. Suddenly, that's cool. I won't go.
Idadagdag mo doon yung layer of, impunity under Duterte. I wouldn't, he obviously did not invent impunity in the Philippines, but siguro, intense yung amplification and pag-magnify because he was a social media president, in effect, even if he doesn't use social media himself. He was a very social media president. I guess that also added to, it added to yung lalim ng scars that Duterte has left behind.
Just the idea that killing someone is justified kasi supposedly ay kunyari linked to drugs or whatever evil of the day that we're focused on. It's medyo nakakatakot siya.
Yeah, and the war on drugs and things. Actually, ang dami niyang layer. Pero hindi. Again, on the topic of social media, another thing that Marcos and the Marcos network, they didn't just inherit this. They, in a way, were the first movers of this and were huge beneficiaries of disinformation on social media. Clearly, that's one of the reasons why dinamay ka, no? our industry is at a crisis, right? Like, a lot of people don't trust us.
Oh, that's true, no? Although partly then, we have to also acknowledge that mainstream media or dominant media has had its own parang missteps din. Pero yes, there has been a very parang concerted effort to discredit us, no, or to if not discredit us, parang hype up itong mga secret parang purveyors of secret knowledge, parang alternative, well, ayun nga, alternative facts, no, and the facts that they don't want you to know, no. At yun nga, yung Marcos propaganda has been seeded online for kailan pa 2010s, ganyan. Medyo matagal talaga yung setup nito, no. So ayun, so we're here now, where we're fighting for attention, we're fighting for trust with people na sige, for the most part, I suppose, marami namang vloggers who are earnest about what they're doing. Pero meron din naman na hindi natin ma-deny, no, that they're part of networks na designed to push propaganda or designed to push disinformation. Hindi na rin yun bago actually.
Yeah. How do we, tama naman talaga, hindi mo talaga bago yung itong misinformation, disinformation, itong Talyano Gold na recently ko lang, nung campaign ko lang narinig siya ng buo, pero apparently lumang kwento na pala yun, na basically sumabog lang because of the online, because of social media, right? But how, sorry, sa'yo ko tinanong as if alam mo yung sagot, no? How do we make sense of that? Kasi parang siguro yung hindi na debate ngayon, hindi na tayo gatekeepers talaga. Like, wala tayong magagawa. It's not the same as it was. Para akong, I'm not being nostalgic at all. I don't mean to, and I don't think I'll ever, like, imagine the time when media was the gatekeeper, or the only gatekeepers, as siguro a golden era for me. I don't necessarily believe in that. But I don't know, like, how do we make sense of that? Parang we don't hold probably the same power, but it also speaks to, now there's no more monoculture, right? Na kung dati si Britney Spears lang sorry sa mga Christina Aguilera fans, hindi lang si Britney Spears yung pop girl of that era. Pero you get what I mean? Like, si Britney lang yung kilala ng bulk ng population. It's not the same now, like, diverse na. So, how do we make sense of this shift in our media landscape?
Totoo naman, hindi na tayo yung, kumbaga, the only source, no? Pero I don't think that means also parang letting our guard down. We do still have to maintain yung gatekeeping function na yun, no? I mean, that's part of why hiwala yung media. That's what makes us precisely people you should trust. Kasi nga, yun nga, we do the gatekeeping. Sige, hindi 100% perfect all the time, pero we are trained to do that, and it's part of the job. Parang tayo yung mag-evaluate, no? Okay, this thing is newsworthy, or this information is worth sharing, no? Kasi otherwise, kahit ano na lang pwede, and that's medyo delikado yun, na parang whatever facts you feel are correct, pwede na yun. Hindi siya ganun eh.
Yeah. Hindi pwedeng selective. Let me revise what I said. We still try to be gatekeepers of you know, how you should look at things in a way. I hope people don't take that out of context and make bad of what I just said. But siguro kung visual lang, kung dati talagang the gate was solid and impenetrable, ngayon ang dami ng mga windows, you know, like, things leaking out, and we're doing our best, I guess, to, you know, still make sure that what reaches the public is what's true, or what's true to the best of our abilities and judgments at that time.
Verifiable truth at that time. But, well, I think I'll go with si Kaloy Conde posted a while back na parang it's good in a way na parang may kalaban tayo, and so we have to up our game din talaga, na parang at the time kasi ang usapan was they would let vloggers and influencers cover Malacanang, no? And ayun nga, so may competition tayo. So we do have to be better. We do have to basically do the job better, na vet facts, give better context, more context. Mas ganun siya. um, hindi na tayo only, yun nga, hindi na tayo yung only source of information, but we have to be the most reliable pa rin, ano. Nagbago lang siya. So, I feel ganito yung pakiramdam ng mga tao in back when online news was new. Na parang,
Yeah,
ay, ano ba
I
to?
was gonna say. I was
Oh,
gonna
diba?
say. Yeah. Yeah.
Yun nga, na parang, ano ba itong mga upstarts na to? Ganyan. Wala namang alam to. Parang binigyan lang ng computer. Journalist na. Well, surprise. Journalists nga talaga kami, no? At, nasa na tayo ngayon? Sorry, print,
Yeah. No,
guys.
no, but it's true. No, I think, ako naman, I think it's human nature to be sometimes scared of something that you're unfamiliar with. Like I can only ngayon nga that I'm older, I can only imagine myself. I can only imagine how people perceived me back then when I was like what 20, ano ba ako nun? My early 20s, entering these major beats. So for people who aren't familiar with how Philippine journalism in general normally works, no, yung mga big beats, quote unquote, legislature, House, Senate, Malacanang, ano ba mga, basta yung mga big institutions, kumbaga AFP, normally the people assigned there are the veterans na. So mga at least 5 years, 7 years in the industry because you have to work your way up. But nag-history ako no ng online portals in the Philippines. But when you're a new news organization that's primarily online, and I'm not just talking about Rappler, but even like Star, right? Na separate entity naman yun, hindi naman yun so mga baguhan din, mga bata din yung mga initial batch of reporters mo. So kung bago ka na entity, syempre wala kang choice, saan ka huhugot ng veterano na 5 years, 7 years na in the industry. You send your greenhorned, theoretically also talented and competent reporters.
Coming from a good place.
Yung mga may pure hearts naman. Pero objectively, like, we were very, like, I can only imagine how, I don't want to say jarring, but unsettling it might have been for the more, yung mas matagal na sa industry to see, like, these children. Basically, we were children. Your early 20s, hawak ka lang may iPhone. Shoot
yeah, exactly. Doing your best.
Diba?
Earnestness lang.
And pretending na gets mo kung anong ginagawa mo. Ay, sorry pala. Para sa mga hindi familiar, si Kaloy Conde himself is a former journalist, correct? Tama ba?
Yes. Yeah.
And he's
ano siya?
Right,
like, very, very veteran journalist siya. And now with Human Rights Watch, no?
Yeah.
Yun. So basically, what he was saying was we have to be better now. And I guess yun yung pressure on the legacy media guys back when we were young, no? Na parang you have to be better than the online people. And I guess for a while that was true. Pero I can say na medyo kaya na nating sumabay siguro, no? Kahit pa paano. But
nag-change na rin yung ba't ka tumatawa?
I feel kasi kaya naman talaga natin sumabay even then. But, you know, to be humble lang. Pero so yun nga, that is the challenge now. How do we adapt to this new form of giving the news, no? While still being news.
Yeah.
At yun yung hindi pa rin natin talaga nasasagot. We're working on it, I think.
No, I mean, it's a very, okay, ngayon na, because I use TikTok, but when I say I use TikTok, I scroll endlessly through TikTok. I don't create TikTok, so it's different. And it's honestly unsettling and weird for me to try to think, like, to try to imagine a world na ako yung nagtitik. It's a very different medium. It's not the same as video reports, not at all. Napakaiba niyang language niya. And to be fair, you guys do a really good job out of TikTok, by the way.
Thanks. Clearly, hindi ako yun. It's not something that I know how to do. And I think that's okay. Meron tayong, like, hindi naman dahil there's this new format, there's this new medium, no? It doesn't mean kailangan lahat tayo nandun, but it is important that some of us are there, or most of us are there. Kunyari, people like us, baka hindi tayo limber enough, no, to participate. Pero yun, I'm glad na may yung sumunod sa atin ng mga batches ay nandun. Hindi ko pa ina-accept
Hindi
yung generation.
Generation na talaga sila, Jonathan. Sorry. Gen Z na yan eh.
I suppose
Hindi na
so.
natin ma-deny eh. As in, how old? I'm in my early 30s. There are, thank God for K-12. So, normally 22 na sila pag, so, wala pang full decade younger than me ata na reporter at this point. Kasi 22, 23 na sila pumapasok sa industriya ngayon. Unlike when I started, 20. You enter 20, normal lang yun. Now, can I ask a little bit about TikTok? I know that you guys are, I don't know, like, I feel like in the Philippines, kayo yung
weird.
No, it's a very distinct brand. And it's very Gen Z. I think it's bold words to no? Pero para siyang, para kayong Wumawako. I'm sure you've seen the Wako.
Yeah, I've seen that guy. Yeah.
You know, team na sila. Tatlo na sila ngayon.
Tapos may bago silang office, no? Parang something.
Oo, dati mag-isa lang siya nakasikado costume. Ngayon, team out. Yun ba yung dream mo? Mag-costume ka rin.
Ay, alam mo, simple lang ang dream ko. Dream ko lang ay mag-video na naglalakad. Nagsabing, welcome to ganyan-ganyan. Nandito tayo ngayon. But anyway, I think the idea there is, kasi we've always, kunyari, Philstar has always been like, basically the younger sibling of the star, no? And hindi naman kami magiging, we won't reach that level of seriousness. Pero Jari yun eh, legacy yun eh. It's different, no? Parang sasabay ba tayo sa quest to be taken seriously, or gawa tayo ng sarili natin na okay naman, may information naman, but also basically it reflects who we are. So yun nga, ganun nga kami naman talaga sa office. So yeah, I think it's working. At kung hindi man, at least we're having fun with it. I think the idea there is, parang if we're going to do things the way that legacy media does it, hindi namin kakayanin yun. Wala na kami resources. Wala naman kaming ganong stature, no? I mean, may bigote ako, but still, it's hard to take me seriously. So, ganun siya. We're having fun with it. We're seeing where it will go. Habang may trabaho ba kami, no? Malay natin.
Napaka-dark naman nung last na hirit.
Hindi, like, kunyari, we're paying you to do these videos of you jumping around on a table. Mahirap. But it's
so basically,
it's naman.
Sabi niyo sa quest, and I'll quote you, quest to be taken seriously, fuck it.
Basically, yes.
None of that shit.
I mean, diba, kung bata naman ang tingin nyo sa amin, then let's run with that. But still actually do. Let's do good work pa rin naman. We also have long form.
Yeah, but if you look at the data rin kasi for the Gen Z people, Gen Z people, wait lang. So, ang luma
Gen Z po.
Ang luma pakinggan, parang lang yan, the Twitter. Sir, kung nagkataong nanonood ka nito, no, naalala pa rin kita nung yung sinabi mong magaling si Bea sa the Twitter. Anyway, inside joke yun. Sorry. Hindi, but if you look at the news consumption habits of Gen Z, I don't know if this is in the Philippines or in the US, but they watch more, they prefer to watch short videos a lot of the time. Yeah,
I mean, even us, no, na not as young, like, kunyari, if it's a 3-minute video, that is a little long even for me. Diba? Let's get to the point. Parang gano'n.
Yeah. Although, ako extremes ako. I prefer either like a 2-minuter or a 1 or even a 30-seconder. That or, kunwari sa podcast, gusto ko at least 30 minutes long.
Ay, habaan nyo na, no? Oo, tama.
Oo. Parang, alam mo yun, parang uupo na ako dito or mas realistically, magluluto ako or maglilinis ng bahay.
Doing something else.
Diba? Parang,
tell me about submarines in World War II. While I'm
I like listening to, there's a, like, endorse ng ibang podcast. There's a podcast called Ologies. Mga experts kung ano-anong ology. So, biology lang pala. Hindi. Kunwari, the science of, ano bang isa niyang kinover recently? Flies or something. Anyway.
Okay.
Nag-iba na yung utak ko sa dapat pag-usapan natin. News consumption.
It's the nature of of the medium.
of a podcast.
Tumatalon-talon
Of a
talaga. Yes.
No, pero di ba, parang, so I think, like, to commend you guys, and also siguro as a wake-up call, hindi naman wake-up call, pero parang ano nga, parang ito yung challenge siguro sa newsrooms, bukod, ang daming challenge, no? May disinformation ka na
Dami.
nga, may general media oppression ka pa, meron ka pang
Nagmamahalang
changing times.
bilihin.
Uy, totoong challenge yun, ha?
Ay, totoo nga.
Pinag-usapan namin ni Ma'am Inda yun. Actually, gusto ko nang tanungin, tumatalon-talon talaga tayo sa topic, pero gusto kitang, I want to ask you about that, because I mean, nasa intro mo naman to, pero sa NUJP, of course, NUJP isn't just in Metro Manila, obviously. National nga eh. pero, no, because I asked Ma'am Inday about this in the 3 episodes ago also, na when we talk about media freedom, for better or worse, the tendency is to limit the discussion to Metro Manila. No, I'm not talking about us, but like the average Filipino siguro, no? Parang yung napapansin mo lang, syempre, Rappler or ABS-CBN or the threats against Inquirer from Duterte, for instance. But how about our colleagues outside of Metro Manila, in the provinces, in the regions?
Ay, oo, alam mo, I feel, no, na there is, yun nga, you're right, no, we have a tendency to focus, siguro nga, dahil nandito yung most networks. Nandito tayo, no? So there is a tendency to focus on that, no, or there is a tendency to focus on the bigger companies. And actually, ito rin, no, there's also a tendency to focus on yung political na repression or yung ganitong mga moves, no, to silence us.
Yeah.
Pero we do tend to siguro sometimes forget na yung pain ng journalists, yung economic milieu that we're moving in is as much press freedom issue as etong mga libel cases, no? I mean, of course, again, pag libel case meron na naman economic dimension. Na yun nga na actually parang mas malaking issue pa nga siya na parang yung rates ng freelancers are pretty much the same as nung nag-freelance ako in 2005. So that's
man.
It wasn't enough then.
But Jonathan, mas ilang years ago yun?
Wag mag-math. Matagal na yun. Many years parang
ago.
Ganun pa yung rates. And so mas madali tuloy or parang mas madaling mahulog sa mga ethical traps or ethical dilemmas, no? So, yun nga, we have to talk about that as well. And hopefully na this year, we're hoping to get more into that then, yung labor aspect, yung economic aspect of press freedom. Ayun, nangampanya na ako. I'm so sorry.
No, that's why you're here. No, pero I hope this, I don't think this is a hot take, but I think people also need to understand that being ethical is also a privilege.
Yes.
I mean, in order to be ethical, lalo na kung like may lantaran na offers, you have to, di ba? Parang you have to be in a secure enough place to say no to those offers na it's not, in an ideal world, madaling mag-no sa mga temptations of not just politicians, but even corporations, but
yun nga eh. It's easy for us to say in our white apartments, no, and well-lit, pero hindi, yun nga, kaya ang hirap madaling sabihin for some of our colleagues, no, parang ba't mapapakain ba ako niyan? And truthfully, often ang sagot ay hindi, and there should be movement then there to improve yung pay ng journalists, improve kahit nga yung getting hazard pay, getting holiday pay, overtime pay, hindi siya given for a lot of our colleagues. So minsan din parang when we talk about press freedom or parang parang this is lawfare against journalists, parang medyo mahirap din siyang maabot or parang mahirap din siya i-communicate to our colleagues, lalo na mahirap siya i-communicate to our audiences.
Yeah. And ito naman, the hill that I will die on. Just the fact that you and I are able to choose journalism in the Philippines. And the kind of journalism that the kind of journalism, hindi ko ina-exalt yung mga sarili namin, pero it also
Mm-mm.
involves privilege. Kasi
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I personally know so many colleagues who have had to leave journalism because simply
Yes.
it's not enough to sustain a life, hindi nga a lifestyle, a life, right? For many
Mm-mm.
people.
Oo, totoo yan. Even kahit nga yung fact that we can ano no, pwede tayong mag-discuss
Hello.
ng journalism sa inuman no, in other wholesome activities no.
Yeah.
That's also a privilege no. And yun nga,
Yeah.
kaya nga din ang hirap minsan i-communicate ng medyo abstract yung things like press freedom when yun
Yeah.
nga,
Yeah.
people have been leaving, ang dami na siguro may 10 na since the elections. I mean, part of that is politics,
True.
but part of that is also mahal
Economic
na yung
reality.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah. I say this not to get sympathy from people who are listening and people who are watching. Pero para maintindihan nyo rin siguro yung, kasi these are things that, I'm not gonna report about how, what do you call this? I'm not probably ever gonna report about the privilege that comes with being able to stick to journalism. But I think to understand where we are, where our colleagues stand, parang people should also realize that the pay, it's not even just that the pay is not always high enough. Sometimes it's not enough, period. So wala.
Mm.
Goodbye journalism ka talaga. Face the difficult
Or
choice.
worse probably is you'll stay pero you'll have
Yeah.
other sources of income na
Yeah.
which might border on PR, mga ganun,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
problematic siya, no?
Yeah.
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 Kasi
I mean, when
nag-English
that
tayo
happens,
ngayon, so that's also, you know.
di, pero alam mo kung nangyayari yun, hindi rin, I fully understand na mali yun, and I personally wouldn't do it myself, but I also understand why some of our colleagues do it.
Mm-hmm.
Parang, and it's too, ang hirap niya actually
Oo.
pag-usapan, pero,
Actually, related to that, may sinabi si Sir Vergel Santos dati, no, na if you can't, parang if you can't stand for press freedom, get out of journalism, no? Tapos matagal kong dinamdam yun na parang, ba't ganun?
yeah.
Pero na-realize ko, hindi naman yun directed at us na parang basically ay grunts lang din naman. Ano. It was directed more to siguro upper management or to owners. No? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's also their burden. It's also their responsibility to make sure na yung mga tao nila are, well, taken care of. No?
Yeah.
And not
Yeah. I mean,
falling into these yung hindi tayo nakakatulog, pero paano ba ako? Hindi naman paano kakain, but like, how do I survive? No? Sana yung mga ganun problems. Hindi siya burden lang natin, no? Parang hindi siya masasagot lang ng slogans like, oh, it's for the truth, ganyan. It's para sa bayan, ganyan.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, when we scream, we have to scream up, but it's difficult. It's abstraction. Ang abstract din kasi isipin ng kasalanan to ng higher beings. Ginawa kong
aliens.
Zeus at si Athena. Galing sa langit. But I hope that if you're listening to this, you understand what I'm talking about na. Sometimes the problem, like sometimes the issue of media freedom is oppression from within in specific cases, in some cases. Yeah. So anyway,
Yes.
enough na lang bigla yung topic.
So basically, ganito rin naman tayo mag-usap in our wholesome activities.
Oo, sa mga what do you call this? Mga daytime
yes.
alcohol-free activities.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. I think this also connects to the shift in how people perceive mainstream quote-unquote media, whatever. I mean, to me kasi vague din minsan what mainstream media means or what people refer to when they say mainstream media, no? Pero yung diminishing trust in media as a whole, and I mean, I think I'd like to think, although I don't think it's true in a world as polarized as the one that we live in, but I'd like to think to make a stand and say that we cannot forget na ang daming namatay ng martial law. Hindi
Yes.
natin dapat kalimutan na the Marcos family has not said sorry about the sins of that era, and I don't even want to say the father kasi
Mm-hmm.
and hindi sila maliit nun, malaki na sila nun. Anyway,
Yes.
yung
Oo.
point ko dun ay a lot of us in the media, I'd like to think, majority of us, di ba? Parang we work hard to remind people
Mm-hmm.
of Philippines. It's not really that the extent of a history, no? Parang relatively bago
Yeah.
hindi naman sa generation natin. But
Well, buhay na ako noon, so it can be
ay
argued. Like, as a baby naman. As a baby. So, like, objectively, maganda yung buhay ko noon as a baby.
Kasi nga naman, naka-diaper ka nun eh. So,
Wala mga problema nun.
medyo mahirap i-assert na naghihirap ka nun. Siguro sa ganung perspective, tatanggapin ko
I will allow.
with no question na masarap yung buhay mo nun. Pero, hindi. Pero we've been working very hard, I think. And not just our organizations, but a lot of our colleagues in media working very hard to remind people that this is what happened in the past, and this is why, and not just in the past, no, but even in cases against Bongbong Marcos, like the tax case, things like that. And yet he won, and he won by a majority mandate. The first majority elected president in the post-EDSA era. How do we make sense of that? Or how have you made sense of that win?
Okay. Hindi natin kasi tanggalin pa rin na there were a lot of forces at work towards that victory, no? Nabanggit na yung disinformation networks, but I think just as importantly, yung alliances of political families and political parties that contributed to this win, ano? Nakita naman natin, parang ano talaga to eh, it's like basically a supermajority of all the big political parties, no?
Yeah.
So, yes, we did our best, I suppose, or parang we wrote na yun nga to remind people of those things, no, ng martial law. Pero baka nga insurmountable na yung clearly nanalo, no. So parang baka insurmountable na yung alliance na yun, yung all those political machinery, but also in disinformation networks. Ayokong isipin na to most Filipinos that martial law didn't really matter, or that yung violations that happened didn't matter. Ayan, that's something that I have to parang think about pa rin. Pero I think primarily it was the machinery at work, no. Yun nga, people may have voted for the specific candidate, no, pero hindi natin alam if the quality of the information they were basing their vote on, kung saan galing yun, no. Pero yun nga, we had elections at siya yung nanalo, and that's something that we have to think about further, no. But in the meantime, yun nga, we can't get trapped in parang self-flagellation and, oh no, we failed, ganyan, ano. We have to keep doing the job. We have to keep doing it better, I guess. Parang ganun.
Yung own personal struggle ko, and not just in this administration, not just in covering this administration, but in the work in general. Parang you're supposed to, in an ideal world, when you're a reporter, when you're a journalist, you're supposed to make sense of what's happening in real time. And I find that when you're in that moment where you're trying to take from the past to make sense of the present, but you're also looking towards the future, in the hope siguro of making sure that your assessment is correct or grounded on reality. I find it in conflux of all those things, it's sometimes hard to actually make sense. It's easy to make sense of the story, but it's hard to make sense of where your psyche actually is in that moment.
I guess in a way that's where journalism helps, na parang kasi there are may processes tayo, may protocols tayo to doing a story, no. So we are able to do that nga, na parang we can provide as much context as we can. Pero yung sa personal na na parang why is this happening?
Bahala na kayo dyan.
Parang sige, we will explain this as much as we can based on yun nga, bigyan namin yung context and yung historical facts na this is what happened. Tas yun, well, the idea naman talaga is to help the reader make sense of this event, di ba? Or of this particular point in time. Pero I think kailangan din natin as media to step back a little bit. Yun nga, get a wider perspective, wider lens. At yun nga, siguro, and some space then to wonder pa, ano nangyayari? Like, sometimes we don't know din naman.
Yeah. And I think, soft plug na to. No, I think the best way to do that is honestly to talk to your colleagues.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's very silly, but sometimes, because I used to be allergic to the thought na all my friends are journalists also. Parang boring naman nun. Parang parang kayo na lang parati. Pero I find that it also helps you make better sense of where you are, not just in your profession, but also as a person.
Oo, totoo yan. And I sorry.
So, soft intro yun too.
And then, there is that sense like I'm really thankful na meron akong like groups, no? Or hindi lang chat groups, like organizations or an organization na pwedeng mag-usap na parang pwede mag-usap na parang okay, this is where we are, ganito yung sitwasyon natin, this is what we might be able to do, no? Kasi nga, no, I've been talking about self-flagellation for a while. And kasi I do have a tendency to parang, yun nga, parang doom scrolling but in life, no? Na parang, oh shit, we're doomed. Well, and it really helps na may mga makakausap ka na like, colleagues who will say na, oo nga, baka ganyan yan, pero here's what we could do. Or parang, nangyari na to nung, let's say, panahon ni Arroyo and this is how we dealt with it, no? So yun nga, basically, although we are part of a bigger community, yung journalism community is also, yun nga, it's its own thing and very helpful din talagang yung interactions among colleagues, no? Kahit nga sa, sa level lang ng samaan na loob na parang, kunyari, bad trip ako sa tao to for like years. Tapos nung nagkausap kami, okay naman pala, gano'n. Sana may gano'n din about me.
Hindi, yun yung nawala nung pandemic. Imagine. Hindi lang naman sa atin nangyari yun. Pero, but I mean, especially, I think that's one of the things that pulled me down the worst. Because it was during the first year of the pandemic na Maria and Ray were found, 2020, right? Correct. Were found guilty in the cyber libel case. ABS-CBN was shut down in 2020. Parang, there were a lot of things going on in our industry and we couldn't talk about it really in person. And I think there was sorry, nag-overshare na ba tayo sa mga taong hindi naman journalist at like, session. Psych session.
It shows we are human.
Ganun kami on our off times. We talk about, we unpack our emotions. Mas mura kasi siya. Joke lang.
True.
Mag-therapy kayo kung kailangan.
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
For our listeners who so siguro yung unang second to the last question ko siguro, if people wanna support journalism, syempre kung sa Raptor meron na kaming financial channels for that, for people who wanna support us, but like if they want to support journalism as a concept, if you wanna, how can people support journalists in the Philippines?
Well, ang most basic niyan would be to read our stories, watch our stories, no, and share those, no, instead of kunyari bad trip ka over this piece of disinformation. Kasi there is a tendency to parang quote tweet it or whatever, or parang and you're actually spreading that that disinformation. So why not share stories that you like or stories that are na educational or that shed light on certain issues, no? So that's number one, syempre parang kaya naman tayo gumagawa ng reports para mabasa ng mga tao din talaga or para mapanood ng mga tao. So yun, that's the biggest support, no? But also yun din, when journalists are under attack, it really helps kahit na kahit on social media lang to show your support. Yun lang, parang we stand with Rappler, for example, or well, hindi naman kami. But in general, no, standard journalists, also, yun naman, every now and then, there are calls for donations, for example, to yung Legal Defense Fund for Journalists. Yun, no? Meron ding non-ASP na Emergency Fund for Journalists, which help. So, pero mas donations yun, mas financial yun eh. On a spiritual level or on a parang psychological level, it really helps, no? Na sinishare yung stories natin. And if you can, medyo hindi mo siya masyadong creepy, pero parang pagpadala kayo ng like comment, oh, I like this story, or thanks for what you do, ganyan. Most of the time, na-appreciate naman yun. We appreciate that more than, okay, mamatay ka na, mga ganun, no? I mean, if people can go out of their way to send stuff like that, no? Parang, baka naman pwede rin kayo mag-send ng, hey, good job, ganyan. If we did a good job. If not, ganun talaga.
Kung hindi, pwede naman nicely na, uy, mali ka. I also appreciate it actually when people, if I'm actually wrong in the way I've reported things, I absolutely appreciate it when someone actually takes the time out to, kahit hindi na DM kahit public tweet, okay lang. Hindi naman tayo infallible, hindi ko naman sinasabi na I'm correct all the time. Siyempre, for every 100 reports that you'll make, like there will always inevitably be a slip up.
Sure, and that helps us get better din talaga. And we do appreciate that, no? Yeah. Wag lang yung mamatay na kami kasi
sana lang naman. I mean, medyo naman small ask na lang sana yun. Sana wag mong pagbantaan buhay natin.
Hoy, pangit ka, Jonax. Pero baka gusto mong ayusin yung story. Well, ganun. Constructive.
Or a sandwich method.
Tama.
Ang ganda ng story mo. Pangit ka, pero
ganun.
thank you for your service. At least.
Sana madapa ka.
Sana magka-pimple ko. Huwag ganun, guys. Mahirap mag-clear ng pimple. Hindi, pero nahiya si Jonathan. But honestly, if we do have the resources, open your purses. Kasi not necessarily for us, not even for the Metro Manila journalists or the mainstream Metro Manila journalists, kasi a lot of us naman have kahit pa paano resources for legal defenses, but I'm thinking about our colleagues in the provinces, especially the ones who are freelance, na walang home media entity to run to should they face legal harassment. So if you can lang naman, hindi mo ako namimilit. Kung meron na kayong extras na, absolutely.
Yeah, and yun nga, there are calls for donations sometimes. Ayun naman, easy to find if you want to help. Hindi ko lang mabigay at this time kasi hindi ko memorized, no? Pero
ililink natin somewhere here. Yeah. The story page or something.
Yeah. We will give it later.
Click ganyan. Hindi. Okay, 1 hour in na tayo. Last question.
Okay.
Kasi this show is supposed to help people understand. Sana yung last 57 minutes or so, it helped them actually understand where we are and where we came from. But
I hope so.
When you but when you try to make sense of your world, what do you do? What do you listen to? What do you watch? Or what do you... Yun lang naman, do, watch, or listen to, or read, pwede rin.
Medyo mahirap yan, ano? Well, I do listen to podcasts na hindi magbibigay ng specific ones kasi I don't really have favorites. Parang depende siya sa trip ko for the day. Kunya, for example, if it's about submarines in World War II, then that's what I look for, no? But in general, it helps to parang get as many sources of information or of news that you can. Tapos hindi lang sa Philippines na I know marami na tayong issues here, but it also helps to get kunyari a regional perspective, no. Lalo na kunyari sa usapin ng press freedom, which I'm hindi naman obsessed about, but it's what I've been working in yung space na yun, no. It helps then to know, for example, that neighbors in the region are facing similar challenges. Looking at how they're facing those. So in general, hindi ako masyadong into media consumption really when trying to make sense of things. I mean, those help. but it also helps na yun nga makipag-usap sa mga tao, no? Colleagues, if you can, makipag-usap kayo sa mga tao in your community. Kasi it also helps, hindi lang to make, to give you a better idea of what the world is, parang how the world is, no? But it also helps na to get out of yung bubbles natin. And alam mo yun, as journalists, we do tend to have, may running monologue tayo sa sarili natin, ano? And it helps, no? Makipag-usap sa mga tao, basically. Just get out of your apartment, ganyan, or of your bubble, and consume as much information as you can. Pero syempre, be critical din. No? Hindi naman lahat yan ay totoo or dapat pagkatiwalaan. But in general, more information is good. Information is power nga, sabi nila, etc. I mean, like, nagpa-falter na ako at this point.
Basta yun, makipag-usap. Para yung monologue, magiging monologue with an audience.
Yes. In fact, no, si Bea ay lagi nagbabanggit ng Hungary because it's an interesting case study. No? And so yun, it's good to look at how other countries are facing their challenges. I mean, obviously, not all of them are successful, pero sometimes yung struggle is it itself, may value na siya.
Bago ako mag-goodbye, gusto ko lang sabihin na minsan nag-DM si Jonathan sa akin ng story about Viktor Orban. Tapos sabi niya, naalala kita. Tapos sabi ko, bakit naman? Bakit? Why does he remind me of you? Why does he remind... Yeah.
Not Viktor Orban as a person, but yung issue. But
the issue of Viktor Orban. So, we will end on that weird note of how Viktor Orban reminds Jonathan of Gatekeeping. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today.
Thank you,
I hope you enjoyed
Bea.
that conversation, guys. And we will link resources to NUJP so that you can learn about NUJP and learn about the various ways you can support journalists in the Philippines.
And that is this week's episode of 36 Years. Thank you so much for watching. Jonathan and I talked about the various efforts of the NUJP or the programs under the NUJP to help our colleagues who might not be as privileged as me and Jonathan in terms of support that we get from our peers and even our companies. No? So we're gonna give you links either in the description for this podcast episode or in the story page that contains this video or this podcast, so that if you have the space in your bank account and in your hearts to help out freelance independent journalists in the Philippines, you can do so more easily. Again, this has been Gatekeeping. You've been watching 36 Years, and I hope among the many things to discuss, your main takeaway from this episode is how important it is to support independent journalism in the Philippines. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again next week.